Okay, so I gave you a general introduction about the project. Now, quickly about the activity that we have today. It's part of this CREATHRIV-EU network of clusters and business organizations that are supporting the cultural and creative industry. We saw that you were covering different type of sectors and subsectors in this industry, so it's nice. The idea is to establish links and partnerships among us. It's true that it's not always so easy online, but we hope that we can create some connection. The idea is after the presentation on the greening the creative program presentation, we can discuss together and to make the voice of your organization heard and contribute to develop some calls for action. But the aim also of these sessions are to give you an opportunity to access knowledge and share your insight on the challenges that and opportunities in your sector, and get insight from experts on the challenges that we have identified with these projects. So these are the 5 challenges that the whole project is structured around. So the call for project that I mentioned was also about these 5 challenges, and the networking activities that we do here are also about that. So the first one is the use of technology in heritage archives and libraries, but in CCI in general. The green transition in audiovisual and art, but we have some specific focus on some subsector, but it's cultural and creative industry in general. The third challenge is the skills and gender balance in the cultural and creative industry. So the skills gap that exists in this area of economy. The fourth one is the internalization and the synergies between actors representing different links of the value chains. And the last one is the support through investments and innovation policies. And so if this session is focusing on one of them, and today, of course, we are talking about the twin transition, so the green and digital transition. So now I will let Thomas Kroger, which is Senior Consultant and Ecoris, and Adriana Rodriguez, a Senior Research Manager, to present the study that they have realized for the European Commission, Greening of the Creative Europe program. So the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll stop sharing now.
Maite, so much for the warm introduction and for that, for the first, for introducing also the cluster. Great. So we have a presentation for you today on the study that we carried out very recently. It finished around January time for DGEAC on greening of the Creative Europe program. So we are covering we're giving you firstly an overview of the Creative Europe program. What is the Creative Europe program? Then we'll follow and we present to you the objectives and methodology of the study that we carried out. Thirdly, we'll present the main findings and recommendations of the study, which include a greening strategy for the Creative Europe program. Part of our recommendations as well was a monitoring guide, which we're not presenting today. We will touch base quickly on that. And then most importantly, I think for you today, is the good environmental practices guide for the Creative Europe program that we have gathered that might you find useful for your future work in this space. And then we'll have a moment for questions and comments at the end of our presentation. So just to start off with the Creative Europe program. So what is the Creative Europe program? So the Creative Europe program is the European Commission's framework program for support to the European culture and creative ecosystem. It invests in actions that reinforce cultural diversity and responds to the needs and challenges of the culture and creative sector. It has 2 main objectives. The first one is to safeguard, develop, and promote European culture and linguistic diversity and heritage. And the second one is to increase the competitiveness and economic potential of the culture and creative sectors. The program also aims to contribute to the recovery of the cultural and creative sectors by reinforcing their efforts to become more inclusive, more digital, and environmentally sustainable. The Creative Europe program is divided in 3 strands, which aligns with its specific objectives that are listed in this slide. The first strand is the culture strand that covers the cultural and creative sectors, with the exception of the audiovisual sector. The media strand covers the audiovisual sector. And then there is a third strand, the cross-sectoral strand, that covers activities across all cultural and creative sector. The current budget of the program for the period of 2021 and 2027 is of 2.5 billion euros. And I hope that that was clear to you. Most of you, I'm sure you know about the Creative Europe program, but at least it gives you an overview and puts into scene the study that we carried out for the GIEC. So on to the objectives and methodology of the study. I think just
Sorry, do you see the slides? Do you see when I move forward? Yeah, okay, good.
Oh yes, perfectly. Yes. So the study objectives, the main study objective was to inform and support the Commission's effort to mainstream into the Creative Europe's program environmental protection, sustainability, and fighting climate change objectives and actions. It had 4. We did so by doing 4 activities. So we researched what guidance should be provided to program applicants and beneficiaries. Secondly, we developed recommendations, as I was saying, for monitoring and evaluating green aspects of project proposals. We collected good practice guide that support the raising awareness of and on the need of the green transition. And also we documented progress made during the previous and current program on greening. Thomas, on to the next. So what was the scope of the study? So the scope of the study was on the greening of the Creative Europe program, including its substrands that I was just mentioning before. So the creative strand, the cultural strand, the cross-sectoral strand, its schemes and projects. And it also aimed to, so the scope also covered the Creative Europe program impact on greening on the cultural and creative sectors, the structuring greening support to the European cultural and creative ecosystem, and also the raising awareness of the program stakeholders, including potential applicants, audiences, also about the need for the green transition. Importantly, to say that it did not cover the greening of Europe creative and cultural sectors, or culture and creative ecosystem more generally, or other EU programs, instruments beyond what we found in terms of good practices that could provide relevant examples on greening from other programs in the EU that could be applied also to Creative Europe program. Okay, so on to the research steps that we carried out. So we had 3 main phases in our study. So the first one was the scoping exercise. So we carried out desk research, some scoping interviews, and we refined the methods that we were proposing for our study. Then we had an interim phase where we collected data and did the analysis. We carried out desk research. We did extensive consultation activities with different stakeholder groups, which are listed in the slide. So the Strand program managers, media and culture, European desks, representatives of EU level networks, beneficiaries of the program, representatives of other EU programs, also with some representatives of other European DGs. so a vast consultation effort. And then we triangulated all this data. And then we had in the final stage, we prepared our consultations and recommendations, carried out a policy Delphi, some validation workshops, and finalized the research. In terms of, sorry, I forgot to mention, so in terms of data collection, so apart from the stakeholder interviews, we did a literature review. We mapped all the greening projects that were available and were already being financed by the Creative Europe program in the previous Creative Europe program, and just to understand what the share of projects being funded by the Creative Europe program that had some greening objectives and greening activities, to understand the percentage of green projects being funded by the Creative Europe program, and also a beneficiary survey. I don't know, Thomas, if you want to, I went very quickly through this, and I don't know if you want to add anything on the research steps.
Not necessarily. I think unless you have more to cover, I would maybe move towards the findings. So thanks Adriana, and thanks very much also from my side for having us today and giving us the opportunity to present the findings of and recommendations that we came up with for the study. So overall, the study ended in, I think, November last year. And was published earlier this year, and it basically comprises 4 main documents. One is the main report, which summarizes our research findings and in light of several research questions. What we think might be more interesting for you today, especially, is if we cover a bit more the standalone documents that we drafted alongside, which on the one side is a greening strategy for the Creative Europe program, which is a monitoring guide, and the good practice guide that we developed over the course of this project. The idea with these standalone documents really is to have to really synthesize the findings from our research and to transform them into somewhat more practice-oriented actions and recommendations and reflections from our side for the future, so to say, of the program and how greening within the program can be achieved. I'll start with the greening strategy. We've also put in the slides links to the documents for your reference, if they are shared. And the overarching question really for the strategy was for us to think about how we can strengthen sustainability in the Creative Europe program and how we basically can green it overall, also in light of the European Green Deal, the overarching objective to reach net zero emissions and reduce the environmental footprint basically of any action of society overall by 2050. And as Adriana already pointed out, I want to make this disclaimer again. We don't have the one-size-fits-it-all solution for the creative and cultural sectors overall, but really the strategy that we developed looked firmly at the Creative Europe program itself. We started for the strategy with the idea to develop concrete actions that could be taken on. We were thinking about the short, the medium, and the long term. So always thinking, however, in the logic of programming periods, which are linked to the budgetary negotiations at EU level. So these 7 years programs, and we try to develop several stages of incremental development over the course of this, but also the upcoming programming periods. Starting point was the vision that we formulate as mainstreaming environmentally friendly practices across the program and to really achieve net zero emissions across all supported projects, initiatives, and actions. That's the projects, initiatives, and actions of the Creative Europe program. I think we have to be a bit humble there in the sense that the Creative Europe program is, of course, just a tiny contribution, or offers a small contribution to the overall cultural and creative sectors. I think we found that overall they make up close to 6%, at least, value added. Nevertheless, we see in our strategy, and also through the consultations, probably also with colleagues of yours throughout the research, that the program can have a lighthouse effect and can really serve as an advocate for steering change and showcasing simply change and ideas how greening could be achieved, not only within the program, but then really also across the sectors. So the strategy tries to capture two elements, which is on the one side to think about the visibility. So how can projects or actions that are already taking steps and making efforts to green their activities, how can they become more visible within the program, but also beyond? While at the same time also thinking about how can the practices themselves within the project program be made more sustainable, greened. I think another important point to mention here, and then I hurry on, is to keep in mind that the key objectives that Adriana mentioned at the beginning, the two general objectives of the program, which is to safeguard and promote diversity and cooperation across the EU, and to enhance competitiveness and economic potential of the cultural and creative sectors, are and remain the key objectives really of the program. So any of the recommendations we come up with, any of the reflections we have, of course, need to be seen in light also of these overall objectives. From the vision, we then developed a stylized SWOT analysis building on the findings from our research. I think many of the points you probably are aware of, so I don't need to cover them all, but just to highlight 2-3 key points. On the strength side, probably the biggest asset for the program and the biggest strength really in terms of greening the program are the projects and is the cooperation with the cultural and creative sectors itself. Through the desk research and the other consultation activities that Adriana mentioned, we really learned a lot about the different initiatives, cooperation projects, the good practice examples, the guidelines that are developed in the different sectors and across the strands and schemes, so to say, that the Creative Europe program covers. And utilizing this, we think, is one of the key elements that any strategy to green the program really needs to build on. On the flip side, while there is a lot of willingness also to green and to achieve this green transition, there is also at times uncertainty or lack of knowledge, of capacity. How do we actually go about with this? There's also at times a lack of coordination. We found that there are many initiatives that run in parallel where at times also more exchange could really benefit both sides, so to say, and even third parties. And then overall, there's of course also a budgetary concern in the sense that while greening Creative Europe might also mean that at some point requirements of the program might be adjusted to reflect this in the project selection and in the project support. And there were, of course, voices and valid voices that raised concerns. Well, what about disadvantaged projects from disadvantaged regions or less well-off areas, remote areas, where, for example, an often cited example, traveling by plane was the only option to get anywhere. So we try to take all of these strengths and weaknesses together to get to one, to get to a set of key principles that guided our strategy. And we've put them here. We've developed 6 strategy principles that can be boiled down into the 3 bullets on the left side. So because of the concerns that we heard, because of the differences that are present between the sectors, also in terms of starting conditions, but also the requirements and simply the activities and the work that is done across different sectors. Any pathway towards a green Creative Europe program needs to be a gradual and a feasible one that actually takes stakeholders and the different sectors on board, and that allows them not from today to tomorrow to change, but sets out an incremental and increasing slope, so to say, towards a common objective. And this is again very much linked to the current overall objectives of the program, which are deeply rooted in cooperation support, securing or supporting the cultural diversity and the and strengthening the economic situation of the CCS. All of this then led us to develop 4 stages of development towards our overall vision. And based on these, we developed a set of recommendations that can be grouped around several groups of types of recommendations or actions that could be taken. And the first step is really about taking stock and laying the groundwork. And I think the good news there is that we are already, in our view, very well advanced in this regard. Our study took already stock of what has happened in the past, what is ongoing at the moment. Adriana will talk about this in a minute, so I need to stop. So, for example, we found that 4 out of 5 projects already took measures in the previous programming period to green their activities. They did look for more sustainable solutions to what they did. Or in the current program, in the media strand notably, all the different schemes now actually do have in their calls for applications and criterion and award criteria on environmental sustainability included. But still, also already in the current period, we see opportunities for stepping up efforts that could link to the cited coordination or lack of coordination. That could also mean to promote more front runners, to find ways to really put light on projects that go out and beyond and really take things to the next level. But that could also mean, for example, streamlining the assessment of this award criteria on environmental sustainability in the courts even further. The next 2 steps, then anchoring the greening in the program and stepping up and formalizing efforts, are really more towards already the medium term, so the next programming period and after, in the sense that these are really about embedding and formalizing. So we see also, again, based on feedback that we heard, one key step in firmly defining an objective, horizontal objective on greening or green transition in the legislation for the Creative Europe program, because that might open up actually more opportunities to act and give managing authorities, but also projects, basically everyone involved in the program, more freedom to develop this. This could also mean introducing new schemes or actions then that would help to showcase, for example, green projects or projects that follow a green objective, what we call, and where the key objective of the project really is to advocate for green transition or for climate neutrality also towards their audience. This over time will also mean, of course, to adjust the reporting and the application requirements. And here again, the gradual or incremental approach is a very important one. So we cannot start by introducing strict limits and requirements from the beginning. That would mean to rather ask first applicants about, as it's done now, to report on their ideas about how they want to go forward with green trends, making their activities greener. or in the reporting to prompt them simply to report on this. And also there, over time, this could then translate into more guidance, more clear instructions on what needs to be provided and what needs to be reported, so that in the end, in the fourth stage, then we achieve a green program towards 2050, fully in line with the European Green Deal. Back to you, Adriana.
Thank you, Thomas. So as Thomas mentioned and I mentioned before, so we developed this good environmental practice guide as part of the recommendations of the study. And the aim of the guide was to provide an overview of existing good environmental practices that actual and future Creative Europe beneficiaries could consider when applying and or implementing their projects. So it offers a review of the literature that we collected during this study on good environmental practices. And I guess just important to mention is that the guide does not have any direct connection with receiving funding. It is only just to provide an overview of good practices out there that Creative Europe beneficiaries can consider in the future or at the moment. So the guide is structured into 4 chapters. The first one covers the internal greening practices that organizations could take forward on environmental governance. So it's divided into 5 subcategories: environmental governance, travel and transportation, energy usage, waste management and procurement. The second chapter is about good practices to promote sustainability and fight against climate change, and also good practices to enhance green capacities among professionals and citizens. The third chapter is about best practices to exchange information about greening practices, like this workshop today, for example. And chapter 4 is about monitoring and measuring tools available. And then the annexes is just all the information that we use to develop this guide. And then in Annex 2, you also have boxes of good practice examples that I will draw from today, but you also have way more in the document. So just to start with on the internal greening process. So the guide provides an overview of sort of the 5 environmental aspects that organizations could consider for their own to improve their own environmental processes, but also at project level. So as many of you know, I'm sure, to create a green and environmental friendly culture within organizations, which supports and leads to the establishment of effective governance structure, processes, and operations. There are a wide range of activities and practices that can really support these structures and build awareness around environmental friendly practices among the members of the organization. These activities do need a lot of time and resources to be fully embedded into an organization. Therefore, the guide, what we've done is it explains the different steps to create a strong environmental governance structure, but also it provides a timeline. So it tells you what you could do at an inception phase, at a medium term, and at long term. So the different steps for creating a good environmental governance structure includes calculating your environmental footprint, developing an environmental policy, setting up a green team or a working group that oversees that policy or strategy, create an environmental action plan that aligns with your policy, and that it also gets reviewed in a regular basis. Provide training to your members if they need further training on how to monitor, for example, environmental aspects that are important to your organization. Communicate and build awareness around your environmental goals and your environmental activities as an organization or as in a project. Then, of course, organizations can go also for environmental certifications like the ISO ISO 14001 or other eco labels. And lastly, and very importantly, is also that as part of the environmental governance process that organizations can put in place, is also the assessing towards reaching the environmental targets that have been set up as part of the policy, and reporting on those on progress on how the organization is aiming to achieve those. So, for example, if an organization is setting up an environmental policy, the first step would be to develop concrete targets. So you want to reduce the number of kilowatts per hour that from fossil fuel sources, let's say, that is powering your building, and you want to reduce it by 50%. So that might be one of your targets. Then at the medium term, what the strategy should be including is tools and guides available to everyone that is helping implementing that policy on how to achieve those targets. For example, a great tool could be having an Excel monitoring sheet that where you include all the information, the data to achieve that, achieve those targets. And in the long term, what the strategy could include is that the environmental policy sort of fully embedded into the different other policies of your organization. For example, your procurement policy. So you might have a procurement policy in place to contract different services, and in this policy you might include a point that all the future contracts need to be with providers that have some sort of eco label, or at least have an environmental policy in place. So moving on to the second aspect, environmental aspect that is covered under the internal dimension of the guide, is the travel and transportation. So travel and transportation of participants, artists, crew, infrastructure is one of the largest sources of carbon emissions of any creative activity. And organizations sometimes do not have full control over the traveling practices. And we sort of pointed out to sort of the key ways to reduce emissions. Well, in the guide, we explain, thanks to all the literature reviewed, how it can be done. So the first one is quite an obvious one. It's the reduction of number and length of journey. The second one is identifying sustainable travel options. And the third one is to promote, as an organization, green travel choices. There are many ways in which are also identified in the guide. These are only a few examples of how green travel options can be promoted. So the first one is to have adequate, for example, facilities for cyclists, for colleagues that cycle into work. But also another example would be like working with local authorities to ensure that the signage for pedestrians or for cycling lanes within for the venue where an event is taking place is visible and for everyone. And then in terms of energy usage, so the guide also provides a few good practice examples of how organizations can deploy and reduce their environmental footprint from their energy usage. And it's divided per type of activity. So we divided it per building and venues, production, deployment, and distribution of creative work, and the implementation of cultural events and festivals. So there are different steps and good practices for these three different activities. So, for example, in terms of building and venues, one good practice, of course, is to use energy efficient equipment as much as possible. And there's a few examples like the photocell. The photocell distopes. Well, yeah, there's a few examples in the guide from other that are currently being used by different organizations. Then we have waste management. So waste is also, a lot of the creative activities produce a lot of waste, and the practice guide, what it provides a lot of different options of how to prevent, reuse, repurpose different types of waste. We follow the way the section is structured is also around the European Waste Framework Directive. there's a good example that we really liked about this Cuban Wild Revolution project. That basically what they did, they produced a film, and then this film was then shared with schools in Cuba. It was about conservation aspects, and the schools in Cuba reused this film for their own educational purposes. So the film was reused again and repurposed in a way, which is, I think, a great example of how it just, it didn't stop. It was sustainable throughout time because it was used also through by schools. And then lastly, in terms of an internal dimension that organizations can consider when setting up their greening objectives, is about green procurement. So we saw that there are quite a few of creative activities that are actually contracting and procuring services for their food from organizations that are fair trade, that manufacture and produce their products organically, that don't use any kind of chemicals. So there's quite a few guidance about food and catering organizations, also around accommodation. There is a great guide from Julie's Bicycle about touring and what type of accommodations and what you can look up for when going on a trip or doing touring as part of your work. And then also on support services as well, like evaluation and audit. So just to give you just a few more examples of how some of the beneficiaries of the Creative Europe program have been putting in place some of these activities. So, for example, Thomas, if you don't mind, just going to the next slide. Although, yeah, thank you. So the European Theatre Convention developed sustainability code of action in 2021 with the objective of creating a greener and more sustainable and conscious future for theaters. All their members subscribe to the code and committed to measure, understand, and reduce and offset their ecological footprint. Through the code, most of the members have developed a strategy and a sustainability strategy, action guidance, have trained different theater professionals, are starting to communicate their achievements, and have also launched public debates between artists, scientists, and other stakeholders. So the European Theatre Convention, so this code has really, it's sort of built up the structure and processes for different members to really sort of take environment into consideration and put forward their own strategies. And it's a code that is quite well drafted and provides you with different steps that different organizations could put forward when setting up their environmental structures, the environmental policies, strategies, and processes. Then there is this good example also coming from, I'm conscious of time and I have I just realized the time and I have so many other slides, but anyway, I'll try to speed up. So another example comes from this movie, Good Things Await, that was produced by a Danish director that was determined to shoot the movie in her own country, avoiding any CO2 emissions from traveling. And the documentary focused on a farmer that was forced to get out of business due to farming controls and regulations. The whole movie was set up and was filmed in the farm. The whole production crew was fed with the farm products of this farm. And, it's a good example of how waste was reduced in a sort of a very creative way. Another example is from the network of European audiovisual entrepreneurs. that bring together, practitioners from the audiovisual industry. They put together a green policy in 2021 that offers a lot of that provides an overview of how they have limited their travel, how they're dealing with the greening aspects of their daily office practices, the type of workshops that they do with members, and all the work that they're doing in terms of greening for the audiovisual sector. Okay, so on to the next slide. So the environmental practice guide also offers it provides a good practice around raising environmental and climate awareness and building green capacities among professionals and citizens. So as I'm sure you all are aware, so culture and creative content can be really a key driver of change towards environmental and more responsible society. And they really can bring, creating content about environmental change can really change mentalities and encourage change toward greener practices. And there are a few instruments which are listed in the slide that organizations can use for this purpose. So the first one is organization and participation at awareness raising events, including large conferences and festivals. Good example of a festival is the We Love Green Festival, but also educational and participatory events. Then they can also participate in working groups to share good greening practices and activities. There are also competitions and awards that can be developed, labs. There's also support and lead on advocacy work towards EU institutions. So we saw that a lot of creative and culture organizations are doing a lot of work on raising awareness around policymakers. They're also producing a lot of green publications. So there's a lot of ways that organizations can raise environmental and climate awareness. And then on building green capacities within their members and beyond, of course, working with external environmental experts that can train people within the creative and cultural organizations on how to improve and consider green practices. If there is no, internal knowledge, there's a lot of environmental experts out there also focusing on culture and creative sectors. Then there is also a lot of training on good practices. So many of the European and national platforms that we spoke to have been working on training offers on, for example, how to develop a greening strategy, setting up and implementing environmental management system, creating monitoring tools to calculate your environmental impact. So there is a lot of training out there. Then there's also information sessions, good green practices and research, collaborate with organizations that have a strong capacity and experience in greening, and of course support existing green initiatives that are promoting dialogue about greening. So that's sort of it in terms of external dimensions. And I think in the next slide, Just
Adriana, if you want to take a few more minutes, it's okay. Don't worry.
I'm conscious.
It's okay.
Did go
it's very
through the
interesting
slide
I think
before,
so.
but thank you. So I guess let me just quickly go really touch on one of these examples. So the Thank You for the Rain documentary, which was accompanied by also a communication campaign. So the documentary, together with the communication campaign, really had a push for policymakers. In this case, was in Kenya to step into promoting and creating new policies around climate change. So it was actually quite powerful in order to create change. Just onto the next slide. I think in terms of exchanges and mutual learning, I think I'm not going to touch much on this, just to say that there is a lot of different approaches and to exchange information and around green practices and mutual learnings. we're doing one of them today, the workshops. So there are also conferences, boot camps available, training programs, as I was saying before, forums. There is also, in the guide, we provide examples of what is out there, and I think it's very comprehensive. But I would like to also cover really quickly, which I think is quite important as well in the guide, is the measuring, monitoring of the environmental footprint activities. So measuring and monitoring environmental footprints is fundamental for any organization working towards contributing to the Green Deal objectives. And there are many tools available out there, particularly CO2 calculators, to support creative and cultural organizations to calculate their environmental footprint. However, before going into any of these available tools, we found out that there's a few things that need to be put in place and need to be considered beforehand. First one is data availability. So to use any of these carbon calculators, organizations will need to gather data on the environmental aspects that they're monitoring and want to measure. So for example, energy consumption. Do you know how much your buildings, your venues are producing in terms of energy, and how much this from where the energy sources are coming from? An organization should also, as I was mentioning before, set long-term and short-term environmental objectives to assess progress. Develop also and use monitoring practices. So to evaluate progress towards achieving those objectives, there should be you should have your own sort of monitoring tool available. It could be a simple Excel spreadsheet with the data assessing and those contributing to those environmental aspects that you like to monitor and measure. And then having all that, you can calculate your CO2 emissions using any of the calculators available, or using your own calculations if you explain well how you're calculating it and the sources that you're using. And of course, reporting. And just lastly, just to say that in the guide, we have gathered all from our research the available calculators that are out there for media and culture, and also for media and culture together. So there are 7. We have included 7 media calculators in the guide. Most of them are free of charge. Some are for film producers, for film festival organizers, audiovisual production. Some of them are national, EU, or global. Then there is also 9 for culture, also free, most of them free of charge. Again, for cultural events, cultural organizations. There are also, some of them are national, EU, global, and then there is 2 calculators that can be used for both strands. I will leave it here. I'm really sorry I had to speed up a little bit. I hope that was comprehensive enough for all of you. And I think we're ready to take some questions or just comments overall.
Yes, thank you very much, Adriana and Thomas. I think it's really interesting to make this also. Just a little comment before I let you think about your question. You can either raise your hand to ask it orally, or you can also type it in the chat. But I just wanted to mention that I think it's really nice that to see that this collaboration between our project that is focusing like on supporting the SMEs, but in this particular sector, the cultural and creative industry. And it's an initiative that is supported by GG Grow and the Single Market Program. And this very relevant information coming from the study on this Creative Europe program that is more like DG Education and Culture. But of course, the green transition is definitely a priority across all the European Union programs. So yes, thank you very much for this. We have also a few examples of initiatives that we are supporting dealing with this green transition. But if you want, do you have any question for our expert or speakers of today? Oh, I think the presentation was quite clear and nice. If you don't have questions for now, you can always also ask us by email later. Or, of course, we will share all the resources after the webinar. We will share the presentation and the links to the different guides, etc. So I think we have no question.
Maite,
Giovanni,
I would like
maybe.
just to thank Adriana and Thomas for this presentation. It was very interesting, and I'm looking forward to checking into the document to see real example, because sometimes the concept of green transition can be really vague for SMEs, but it's a very urgent issue. So I think that this workshop that we organized can be just the first of several workshops. It depends on our willingness to keep this alive. But I think that it's a very hot topic for us as a cluster, and obviously for SMEs and policymakers. So I wanted just to thank for this brilliant presentation, and
I think that it's definitely a resource that we could share also. All of the cluster part of the CREATHRIV-EU. We can share this with our network, and also to the SMEs that are beneficiaries of the funds that we have redistributed to the Cascade funding. Because of course the green transition was a transversal aspect also of the call for project that we have organized for the SMEs across Europe. So yeah, thank you.
And obviously then we can share with Adriana and Thomas the results after the implementation of the project, because we have a few projects about that address green transition, either in training.
I have some examples to show after. So yeah, and I see that we have a hand raised from the Venetian cluster. So you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. My name is Carlotta. Nice to meet you. And thank you for having me. So I wanted to thank you because I really enjoyed the presentation. And I'm here representing another Eurocluster about culture. We are France CCI project, and we also have Cascade funding calls. So thank you for having us, because for us this tool would be really relevant also to evaluate the proposal we're receiving, because of course we also are opening application for green transition and digital transition as well in culture and cultural creative industries, but also connected with other sectors. So this is really relevant for us to have a guideline that can help our evaluators to choose the best application. But at the same time, we also work with CREATHRIV Europe as Venetian cluster. So we also have a CREATHRIV Europe project that are ongoing. For instance, we have a project that is called Tomato, that is about a museum and kit for children, for education, with the contents of a museum. So we are producing this product, and we are trying to stay green. So this will be really helpful as well for the production of this kit and the project in general. So we will try to promote as well your research with our channels and with our partners as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this. Yes, as I mentioned, there are 2 Euroclusters dealing with the culture and creative industry. It's nice that both of them are represented today. So maybe if there is no additional question, maybe I can move on with the last part of our session today. And you can always, so I just wanted to, so these projects are really fresh. So these are some example of greening project funded by CREATHRIV-EU. So the most of the project just started beginning of September. So we don't really have results to share now, but as Giovanni said, we could do it later, but just to show you the type of initiative that we are supporting with our Cascade funding. Here it's an example of a documentary film festival organized in Czech Republic, and the SME that asked for some funding basically applied for pilot collaboration project. So this was one of the type of grants we are giving. It's basically to encourage SMEs to partner with other actors, could be public or private actor, to make a prototype that they have to progress thanks to this collaboration, because we know that multi-stakeholder collaboration is really important also in that aspect. And here the aim of this project is to make the audiovisual sector part of the green transition and to support the application of specific tools into practice. The idea is that the festival achieve a higher level of sustainability in its operation and processes, and they are using their existing platform to spread the philosophy, know-how, and share experience with the audiovisual sector. So definitely, I think they would be happy if they are not aware yet of the guide that you just presented. We should definitely share what you just presented. So another example of a pilot collaboration project between an enterprise called Flash Future, and here it's about the aim is that for this SME to position itself on the audiovisual production market with an innovative, but also, most important, sustainable approach. And their project is called Green Movies, Sustainable Cinema. And the overall aim is for them to achieve a lowest environmental impact and to train their workers to be part of this process. And also they would like to make an adhesion to the European Green Protocol, and the funding that we are providing will help them on this journey. And there is a third example. There are many more, of course, because it was a transversal objective of the call for project. But here it's a company organizing music festival in the south of Italy, in Puglia, that is collaborating with an organization expert in circular economy, and they want to make a green transition with the different events that they are organizing. And also, so here, again, in this program, we are really targeting SMEs and economic activities. So the idea is that the green transition can trigger a greater and healthier competitiveness. So we will give you some news about these projects when they will have achieved their results, and they will have some outcomes, because as I said, now all these projects are just starting. So if we move on to the next one, so it's the part where we would like to discuss a bit with you. We still have around 15 minutes, and we would be really happy to have some feedbacks from you. Because the idea here is also to have your insight on what is going on in the different part of Europe and in different regions. And what we want to know is the type of activity that you are implementing as an institution, as an organization, as a cluster, to tackle this green transition challenge. So we have a board prepared for that, but I want to check first if you are happy to share it orally, because we are not so much here anymore, so I think we could have an open discussion.
Probably, yeah. So from you. So yeah, the first question was what activities are you implementing to tackle the green transitions challenge? So if anyone wants to share something they're doing, that would be great.
So if nobody speaks, I can start. I'm sure the Venetian cluster, for example, has some activity around that you already mentioned, but I can just mention as a representative of the Twist cluster. So it's the cluster from the Walloon region, so the south of Belgium, the French-speaking part of Belgium. So our cluster represents all the economic activity related to technology digital technology applied to culture. And we represent several subsectors of the industrial and creative industry, including cinema. And for example, one of the activity that we do is a working group with members of our network that are in the film industry sectors. And this working group has the aim to make different actors of this sector to collaborate to achieve a green transition and to reduce the gas emission in this industry. And so we have different links of the value chain. We have some film producer, but also some company that are providing equipment for the film production, and definitely they are all concerned by this question, and we know that if they collaborate together, they can have a greater impact. And so this working group is helping them to see how they can make some economy of scale and be together to, for example, make some studies to help them in this direction. So that's an example of what we do. I don't know if you have other examples.
Okay, Maite, if I can, it's not into the creative and cultural industries, but I think that it's an approach that can be transferred in all industries. Here with my organization, I represent both Basilicata Creativa and EXO, which is a research organization. We are trying to implement kind of emission trading scheme within the rural society, rural areas, just to offset the carbon emission linked to livestock production. So obviously this can be transferred because what you need is people to agree on how to reward or to put liabilities on specific behaviors. This is what we would like to do, and to implement a blockchain system to monitor the exchange of these certificates, basically. And so as in order to reduce emissions, you need to measure and you need to inform people about what they can do. So I think this is something that can be done both in the rural areas, in agriculture, but in all sectors of economy, I think. And this is something that European Union is also pursuing with the emission trading scheme, to extend the use of the scheme to all the economic sectors.
Thank you, Giovanni.
Okay,
Maybe
so
I can say, please go ahead.
sorry. I am from Hungary, in Oszkart digital cluster, and actually what is important for us is digitalization, of course, and we have several winners also in CREATHRIV who would like, for example, to make applications and instead of printing materials of museums. So that's something, and but can be also an added value in this project, I think, and it might be even between Euroclusters. That, for example, last week we met one of the winners, let's say, one of the companies who receive funding from our Eurocluster. We met them in Athens, and actually I think that even business links can be created between different winners of even different Euroclusters. So that's an added value I didn't really think of beforehand, but now I think that we might have them somehow with the information, with linking to each other. Thank you, and sorry to interrupt you.
No, okay. Thank you, Gerald. It's true that many collaboration we are thinking of now. So if you want to go ahead, you were about to speak.
Yeah, thanks. So I wanted to say something about Venetian cluster to better explain what we do related to the green transition. So we are a cluster of environmental but also cultural heritage. So we are used to present projects that are on the both on the both fields, so cultural and environmental heritage together. So we try to make this kind of mix with the partners that we select for the project, but also we try to support our members, the members of the cluster, in presenting this kind of hybrid project. And since we have experts inside our team that are experts related to environment, that kind of project manager usually follow the environmental and also the green transition of each project. So they usually support our members. We have around 800 members that are from our region only, but also some partners that are from Europe in general. So we try to give this kind of support if they apply to the network. And this network is recognized by the Veneto region that we are working with. So we also have the support of the local authorities and the regional authority. And we try to give this kind of support in the same format you were telling us. So workshop, focus group, this kind of support, but also one-to-one in case they have to develop a project and they would like to receive counseling from us. So this is what we usually do related to the green transition. But speaking about the French CCI Eurocluster instead, we are trying to support with cascade funding this transition, because of course it was required by the European Commission, but it's also our goal. And at the same time, we try to support the collaboration with other projects, this Eurocluster, for instance, and the other that are working in the other sector. We are also coordinating another Eurocluster that is related to rural tourism. So we try to keep this kind of connection strong, to use the same tool that the other Eurocluster, the other project produce, and to make it available for a wider audience. So this is something that we try to, connect and create connection. And this is basically what I'm usually doing for the Venetian cluster.
Thank you very much for this insight. I think, one of the aim here, of course, is to hear what are the different practices across Europe.
Maybe I forgot, sorry if I can, maybe I forgot to tell that we also use one of our shareholder, that is a company that emits this kind of certificate for energy greening. So we also try to include them in the process in supporting our members. So we have we can say the luck to have them, that they are expert in this sector. So related to energy greening in this case, and the certificates. But we do not do that ourselves. We just ask for help from our shareholders. Thanks, sorry for that.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other person that would like to share about their activity to support this green transition in their network, in their activities? And I think we had some nice insight already, so thank you very much for that. So basically we are coming close to an end of this session. Just wanted to, maybe we can just share the last slide of the presentation, or the one just before, Huta, just before.
Yes, just a second.
So you can move on, to the after, this one. So basically, just to explain again that the aim of these sessions are to have some interesting insight from experts or from other projects that are dealing with the same challenges that we are dealing with in our project. So I would like to thank you again, Thomas and Adriana from Ecolis, for this really interesting presentation. And then the idea was to have some discussion and exchange, and we want to draw a set of recommendations for each of the challenges that we have identified. So today was the green transition, but we will organize more sessions until the end of the project, or until April or May 2024, around the other challenge encountered by the cultural and creative industry, and to publish a small document, an online document, a digital document, to gather all this information together and to disseminate it to the different level of public authority, European, national, and regional. The idea being to have perspective from different regions. So as maybe we could have more feedback than what we had today in the session, we might ask also some feedback by email and maybe to a very short questionnaire to ask more clusters and more organizations supporting the CCI to share their example of activities and how they are dealing with these challenges. So I would like to thank you all for your participation. So we will share the resources from this session today on the website of the project, which is hosted on the Your Cluster portal. And we will keep you posted on the future sessions. So thank you again for your participation and have a good afternoon all.
Thank you, our presenters. It was really useful and interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.